Greetings and welcome to Be My Guest. I am your host Hamsha Naidu. Joining me today is Sangeeta Pradhan, a registered dietitian and a certified diabetes educator. Is a diabetes program coordinator of Charles River Medical Associates, a large physician practice group in Metro West, Massachusetts. She is currently the chair of the Central Mass Dietetic Association. Sangeeta is a professional speaker, a guest blogger for the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, Food and Nutrition magazine, and India New England News nutrition columnist. Sangeeta was one of the 20 nominees for INE's Women of the Year Award in 2016. Sangeeta is an expert on Indian vegetarian nutrition with a special focus on weight and diabetes management in South Asians and the general public. She is passionate about getting the facts about nutrition without the hype to the common consumer, and to this end, blogs on her nutrition and food blog at webdietitianwordpress.com. Welcome, Sangeeta. I have been hearing that your diet and lifestyle can actually prevent dementia and neurological disorders. Is that true? And what makes this research so exciting?
Yes, that is absolutely true. So we are on the brink of this very exciting discovery. We now find out that our diet, our lifestyle, and indeed our very behaviors can actually profoundly influence cognitive function, which is the way we think. It can profoundly influence the course of neurological disorders, and in fact can enhance cognitive function. What is transformative about this research is that we can actually change our brains with our behavior. Isn't that exciting?
That is exciting.
And that our brain is incredibly plastic. It's very flexible. So our behaviors can actually change our brain for the better or worse. We've known all along, as you know, that your diet has a profound impact on chronic disease. You know, the usual suspects, diabetes, heart disease. But now we find out that it actually impacts mental health too.
What do we know about how research on your cognitive function has changed over the years?
So for the longest time, up until the 1990s, it was mistakenly believed that we did not grow any new neurons once we grew past early adulthood, and that everything just sort of took a nosedive from there. Well, it turns out nothing could be farther from the truth, that in fact we grow new neurons every day into our old age. And these neurons form neural connections right up into our old age. We can actually change our brain's chemistry no matter how old we are, which is pretty exciting.
It is very exciting. So what does that really mean, and what are the implications that our audience needs to understand?
So when we grow new neurons, these neurons in turn connect with each other through structures known as synapses. And I don't want to make this too technical, but a synapse is simply a gap between two neurons, and through that gap, these neurons signal to each other, and that's how they communicate. And in so doing, neural networks are formed, and this creation of new neurons and the formation of neural networks is called neurogenesis. Neuro, neuron, brain cells. Genesis is the birth of new neurons. What's interesting is that as much as we can all create new neurons into our old age, the rates of neurogenesis though varies widely from individual to individual, and that though is something that's strongly influenced by a variety of factors, which is the whole crux of our discussion.
Yes, exactly. So one of the most important factors that impact neurogenesis.
So again, our very behaviors impact neurogenesis, most notably diet and exercise. So essentially, what you eat, what you choose to eat, Are you eating a lot of junk food? Now, mind you, an occasional poor choice is not the end of the world. We are all human.
Right.
But are we consistently engaging in behaviors that reduce neurogenesis? That's one of the keys here. Basically, the Western diet that is high in saturated fat, high in animal protein, high in added sugars, low in fresh fruits and vegetables, as you can guess, reduces neurogenesis. What does that really mean? What that means is, if neurogenesis is reduced, the creation of neurons is reduced. But it also means that the wiring of neural networks is reduced. And this is important because it is this wiring of neural networks that leads to the formation and consolidation of memory. So if neurogenesis is reduced, you can't form new memories. Your ability to learn gets impacted. And then that in turn has downstream effects.
Right.
When we eat healthy foods, we promote neurogenesis. When we exercise, we promote neurogenesis. So you can see that there's a very obvious correlation between how we lead our lives and our risk of dementia and neurological disorders.
It makes a lot of sense. And everybody talks about Western diet. I wish they would just say the modern diet, because you go to the West, not all, in the olden days it wasn't that way, but So with that being said, now could you explain to us specifically how stress decreases rates of neurogenesis?
So as you know, we are all subjected to varying degrees of stress, most notably a form of stress called oxidative stress. And what that does is it releases free radicals in the body, which are lone oxygen atoms that are highly reactive, and they do a lot of damage. More on that later. But essentially what happens is stress reduces proteins in the brain called neurotrophins. Neurons, brain cells. Trophin is something that promotes the growth of these little neurons. Now, in case the audience is wondering, why is this important? Because we live in a highly neurotoxic world, these little brain cells, the little neurons that are created, as I said, right into our old age, they're very fragile. So it doesn't take much to kill them.
No.
So enter the neurotrophins. Neurotrophins are like a protective mother, nurturing these little neurons and promoting their growth and survival. Unfortunately, when we are subjected to stress, the levels of these neurotrophins go down. So neurogenesis goes down. So less neurons, less neural networks. That means our ability to form memories and to learn is impacted. So this is how stress can directly reduce neurogenesis and therefore impact cognitive function. And so if you think about it, people with Alzheimer's disease can often remember events from the past, like from 20 years ago, but they might forget what they did 5 minutes ago. Did I take my pills? Maybe even did I take a shower? I'm talking about folks with progressive Alzheimer's disease. And that's because the neurons there's a structure in the brain called the hippocampus. The neurons literally die. So the ability to form neural networks, which is the basis of memory, is lost, and so no new memories as such are created. And they become a shadow, if you will, of their former selves. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And how does diet and exercise fit into all of this?
So diet has a direct impact on your brain structure and function. When we eat foods that are highly processed, unfortunately, we are
in that era right now.
In that era where we eat convenience foods, highly processed foods. If we eat a lot of high saturated fat foods, all of those can directly impact the brain structure and function. And in fact, studies have shown that these kinds of diets can actually shrink the hippocampus that I was talking about. So the hippocampus is the seat of learning, of intelligence, of memory. But the hippocampus also is associated with your mood. So anything that impacts the hippocampus then actually not only impairs your ability to learn and to memorize things, but it can actually affect your mood and increase your risk of depression as well as dementia.
You know, depression is what everybody is worried about, and these are good points to that. So it makes sense. And what specific foods have been shown to improve diet function and why?
So there's a whole slew of research that is coming out about specific food components that can impact cognitive function. And I'm just going to start with the omega-3 fatty acids, right? We've all heard of them.
Yes.
One thing that I just want to share with the audience is that omega-3 fatty acids, they are unsaturated fatty acids, and they are actually an integral part of the cell membrane of your brain cells.
Yes.
They are actually an integral part of that. So if you think about, you know, building a strong building, you would want to use superior materials to construct that building, right?
Yes.
So also, by including omega-3 fatty acids in our foods, we actually build a strong brain, if that makes sense.
Oh, yes.
So there's one particular omega-3 fatty acid called DHA, and in observational studies, what they have seen is that having just one fatty fish meal a week can reduce your chances, your risk of Alzheimer's by 60%. So that's pretty significant.
That is.
And in case your audience is wondering specifically what kinds of fatty fish I'm referring to, those would be salmon, mackerel, herring, trout, bluefish, all the oily fish. The oils are, those are your omega-3 fatty acids.
And of course, you know, for the vegetarians wondering, there are lots of vegetarian sources too, DHA in the way of seaweed, right?
Yeah, you can get DHA, you can get omega-3s from algal sources as well. That's actually the original source of omega-3 fatty acids. And speaking of vegetarians, vegetarians can get their omega-3s from walnuts, flaxseed, chia seeds, certain leafy vegetables as well have omega-3 fatty acids. There's algal sources of omega-3 fatty acids as well.
Yes, and I heard turmeric may be very helpful too. Is that true?
Yes, that is absolutely true. I think your audience might be aware that turmeric is a powerful antioxidant. And so there's one small problem with this research. I don't know if I should say problem so much as the fact that most of the studies so far, this is emerging research.
Yes,
we don't have all the answers yet.
But turmeric has been used for
a long time. Exactly, exactly. But we don't have all the answers yet. But what we are seeing so far is very promising.
Right.
So most of the studies actually have been done in animals, specifically in mice.
Right.
Not as many studies in human beings. However, there were some trials, separate trials that were done in rats, where rats were fed a high-fat diet for 4 weeks, and then they were subjected to a traumatic brain injury. The rats that were supplemented with turmeric, DHA that we just discussed, and another antioxidant called vitamin E. What they found was that the rats that were supplemented with these nutrients, they did very well on a spatial learning test. The rats that were not supplemented failed the test. The spatial learning test, there's this famous test that investigators use in mice that's called the Morris water maze. And basically, these little critters are made to run around an open swim area, and they are supposed to locate a submerged escape platform. So it's a test of their spatial learning.
Right.
And the rats that were supplemented with these nutrients did much better, or they aced the test. The rats that were not supplemented did not. So the theory here is that foods that have antioxidant capacity can help restore cognitive function. And the reason is because when we are subjected to oxidative stress,
so antioxidant mean A, C, and E, vitamins A, C, and E.
Vitamin C is an antioxidant, and the vitamin E is an antioxidant. DHA that we just talked about, in its antioxidant capacity, actually helps restore cognitive function.
Okay. You know, I was going to ask you about other foods when you spoke about turmeric, so you want to go?
Sure. So when we speak about antioxidants, our discussion would not be complete if we didn't discuss something called polyphenols.
Right.
And again, I'm throwing out a few technical terms here, but suffice to say that polyphenols are simply a class of antioxidants, and they are found in tea, coffee, cocoa, dark chocolate has polyphenols. I'm sure that's something that your audience would be delighted to know.
Yes, they make good, feel good.
Yes,
chocolate.
absolutely.
It's very dark.
The one with 70% cocoa, dark red wine, red grapes, all of these have these polyphenols with antioxidant capacity.
Right. The purples and the blues.
Yes, the dark colors. So let me just backtrack for a second in case the audience is wondering, what is the connection here between these antioxidants and what's happening with the neurons and whatnot? So remember just a while ago we discussed how oxidative stress reduces BDNF?
Yes.
So oxidative stress oxidizes and damages the body. When we include antioxidants, what are they doing? They are combating the oxidative stress. So the BDNF levels, or the neurotrophins.
So you may want to say what BDNF is again.
BDNF, thank you. BDNF stands for brain derived neurotrophic factor. It's simply a neurotrophin.
Right.
Remember, the neurotrophins are very protective to the little neurons, and they allow those neurons to grow and thrive.
Right.
So the higher the levels of neurotrophins, and specifically BDNF, which is called miracle grow for the brain, by the way, which I think is very apt because it allows these little neurons to grow and sprout. The problem is when we are subjected to oxidative stress, BDNF levels go down,
right,
or neurotrophin levels go down.
As you explained earlier.
Right. That means no neurons are formed, but no new memories are
right,
formed. When we eat antioxidants, we can combat that stress.
Right.
And therefore bring those neurotrophin levels up again, and in so doing, you're able to restore cognitive function.
Right. So what is an easy way of obtaining antioxidants?
So it's very easy to spot an antioxidant in foods because all antioxidants tend to, foods with antioxidants, I should say, have dark, rich, vibrant colors. So the dark green in spinach, the dark purple of grapes, they have an antioxidant called resveratrol. And a lot of these antioxidants are actually fat soluble. So sauteing them in cooking oils can actually help you absorb that antioxidant from the food.
So recently we've been seeing a trend with intermittent fasting and calorie restriction. Does that help in this context at all?
Well, the research so far is pointing in a favorable direction for intermittent fasting and calorie restriction. And let me just define for the audience what intermittent fasting actually is. Intermittent fasting could be going for 2 non-consecutive days in the week where you eat only one meal, or you go for 5 days a week where you fast for 16 hours. In other words, you eat only between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. So what the research shows is that while chronic stress releases a hormone called cortisol, it's a stress hormone, which, as you know, destroys neurons in the brain, which we just discussed. The mild stress created from calorie restriction, as long as it's only a 20 to 30% reduction from your baseline, does not release cortisol and can actually stimulate neurogenesis because it forces you to think when calories are withheld. When you consume less calories, it actually stimulates neurogenesis. It reduces those cortisol levels that we were talking about and allows the neurons to survive and grow, and then does promote cognitive function.
Makes a lot of sense. And how about exercise? How does that help?
So exercise is actually one of the most powerful ways of changing your brain. And as we said before, healthy foods improve cognitive function by raising levels of neurotrophins. Exercise has the same effect. But what's truly interesting is that exercise also decreases your risk of depression. There was a study done at Duke University back in 1999, and what that showed was just a brisk walk, a half hour, 3 times a week, going around the track 3 times a week for a half hour, or a jog around a track, had the same effect on depression as the standard treatment with antidepressants, which is pretty powerful and mind-blowing stuff. No pun intended.
Yes. So all that, it's all well and good, but what is your advice to those folks who do not exercise at all and are hesitant to start?
So I want to use a term called neuroplasticity to answer your question. That's a great question, by the way, Hamsha. So neuroplasticity, as the term implies, your brain is incredibly moldable. It's incredibly plastic. But your brain is almost like a power grid. You have billions of neurons, and they connect with each other through thousands of synapses. We just discussed synapses earlier in this discussion. So your brain is actually like a power grid with these complex neural circuits. And every time you engage in a particular behavior, a pathway in that circuit lights up. The more often you engage in that behavior, it gets easier and easier for your brain to use the same pathway again. It's like when you go home using a particular route, you get very comfortable with that route, right? So also with exercise, initially when you engage in exercise, it's tough. But as you keep engaging in that behavior, the neural connection that is associated with that exercise actually strengthens the more you use it. So neuroplasticity follows the use it or lose it rule. The more often you follow a particular pathway, the neural connection strengthens, and if you give it up, that neural connection weakens. So we can apply that principle to changing our behaviors and inculcating better habits, both with food as well as exercise.
Okay. So, are there any non-diet related ways of improving your brain function?
Absolutely. So one way of enhancing cognitive function is by engaging in something that challenges the brain. So learning a new skill. And it doesn't have to be cognitive. It could be learning to play an instrument. It could be that you may be middle-aged, but you want to learn to skate. It's something new that you're challenging yourself with, and that will stimulate neurogenesis. Meditation, very key to improving cognitive function.
So in a couple words, stress, meditation, any more like that? Because we're a little short on time.
Meditation, managing stress, getting 8 hours of sleep.
And what's your final take-home message?
My final take-home message is in a world where Alzheimer's disease is predicted to triple by 2050, and in a world where the prolific use, despite the prolific use of antidepressants, depression rates are going up, we can use these simple life hacks, the foods we eat, our ability to walk, to transform our brain. So let's try to give up those behaviors that are detrimental to us if possible, and watch the neural pathway sort of disappear. Use whole foods and exercise to sort of synergistically create mind-altering changes in your brain, and use these modifiable lifestyle factors to build the brain and the life that you want.
So my take home of all of this, a lovely message that we're putting to our audience is, try something new.
Absolutely.
Keep on your good healthy eating habits.
Yes.
Keep a whole grain. Don't forget the fats. They're important.
Don't forget the fats.
For the brain, because we're talking brain health basically.
Yes. The good fats, the healthy fats are extremely crucial to building good brain function. And I want to just mention something. You talked about learning something new. Yes, become a lifelong learner.
Exactly.
It's very important.
Very, very important. So with that, thank you, Sangeeta. We had quite a nice, I know this, I can go on talking about this. I love this topic because it is something for our long quality life.
We can all relate to it, and it impacts the quality of our life.
Definitely. And I'm your host, Hamsha Naidu from Be My Guest, always available on actontv.org or at YouTube. Till we meet again, bye-bye, and thank you for watching. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.